And hello.
Hello.
Welcome. Hello, John.
Hey, Ben.
The joys of live streaming. I guess we're live, but just whilst things kind of settle down, we'll do the introduction a couple of times, perhaps, and then we can make sure that we get everybody included. So hopefully you are here for some facilitation tapas with myself and John Spruce. Hello, John.
Hello, Ben.
Today, we're looking to help you with your facilitation expertise. What we'd really love is to give you lots of lovely little tips and tricks, nothing too big, nothing too hefty, but things that you can take away, think about, and apply immediately. Now, so that you are fully comfortable with how things are going to be working today and who we are, we'll do some short introductions, go over how it will run, then we'll crack into it. So, John, do you want to begin with an introduction to yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I tried to keep this one short, though. Right. Generally, I got a chance of introduction in a very short way. My name's John Spruce. I'm a certified Scrum trainer and certified enterprise coach and certified team coach. I have lots of certifications with this, but I've got about 15 years worth of experience working in the agile space, from working with teams in various different sectors and different kind of clients. I love being able to help facilitate great sessions with people and really sort of bring out the value of the people's voices that are inside those groups. So it's great to sort of bring this to life with this. We do a lot of team facilitation training and sessions, and we want to bring some of that to life today, really. So we wanted to share some of that. I'll try to keep it short, didn't I? Yeah, that's fine. I'll keep it there. Ben?
That's pretty good, pretty short. Well, I will go, and I will also try and keep it short. So my name is Ben Maynard. This is a Sheave live stream. Sheave is my organization. And as John said, through my organization, through John's company, we do lots of facilitation training. And the one thing that's become really clear to us over the last, I'd like to say it's recently, but over the last 10 years of doing this, is that facilitation is one of the most critical skills that's required to help get performance in teams and performance in organizations, whether this is in the agile world or whether it's in the with product teams or whether it's nothing to do with either of those things. Facilitation is such a critically important aspect of corporate organizational life and performance that we just don't spend enough time looking at. So with mine and John's combined experience facilitating groups large and small over the past 10, 20 years or so, we want to run this little series of facilitation tapas where we will be giving you hopefully lots of little ideas, tips, tricks to help you elevate your facilitation game and hopefully join us on the crusade, which is really focusing on how important and really how monumentally effective facilitation can be at increasing team and organizational performance.
Nice. That was good. Yeah, nice.
Thank you,
So
John.
just a few logistics, I suppose, part of the live stream. Some of this will be available afterwards, and we're going to be capturing some stuff in a presentation to share with you guys as well afterwards. So we've got quite a lot of interesting topics to talk about and to take you through some stuff. It is only a short 1 hour sort of lunch and learn, really, and that's why we called it facilitation tapas. Quite nice little chunks that you can get for everything. I think the important thing here is we've got some great takeaways for you, some lessons learned, and we are looking at the chat as well. So with this stream, we can see the chats popping up, and if there are any questions you want to do or anything that you want us to add in or any reflections, we're always looking at that as well. So we'll bring that together.
Yeah. So my plan will be to at times, I was going to use a really rubbish English kind of reference there, but I'm going to be supporting on the technical side of things. I'm going to keep an eye on LinkedIn, replying to your comments, making John and I aware of questions that come up. So we want to have this, as odd as it may sound, on a live stream, as two-way as possible. So if you do have questions as we go, put them into the chat. We're monitoring it. We'll answer the questions as they come up, or if it isn't suitable, we'll answer them at the end. So if you see me looking away or typing, it's because I'm helping making things run smoothly whilst John is delivering some awesome content.
Thank you.
That's okay, and I can see some some friends here as well. So thank you everyone for coming along. It's awesome to have you here.
Stuff.
So John, what was the topic?
The topic of from silence to insight, facilitation, participation for all. What this kind of thing is, what we found is that when we're working with teams of various sizes, regardless of which environment they're in, what kind of maturity they're at, is that can you get everyone's real voice into the room? Can you actually get the shared knowledge of everyone that you're working with in that facilitated session, that event, that meeting, that ceremony, whatever it might be? Can you actually get the participation and the engagement from there? It's often kind of you get the person with the loudest voice, the person with the most seniority. There seems to be a lot of kind of things that may dampen down those quieter individuals for participating. So what we wanted to do is explore that a little bit in this session today. We wanted to sort of talk about why people may not be engaging as openly and as interactively in a session, and then some tools and techniques you can use as a facilitator to bring those people into the fold, create that confidence to share their thoughts, and also to engage them across the rest of the group. So we've got a number of different things to work through there. And part of the idea today is to share our lessons learned and a bunch of tools and techniques that you can walk away with and start engaging those in your sessions in the next meeting you have. The first thing, really, I suppose, Ben, we talked about what are the obvious and not so obvious problems with people who are not able to engage. That's stuff that we were talking about earlier today, if you remember.
Yeah, I do. And I think, and I'm going to share my screen so you can see this. And everything we're going to show on the screen will be made available to you. Or if you want a copy of what we're showing, please do put in the chat you'd like a copy of it, and we'll get you a link to it or send it across the PDF. Is that when people talk about engaging silent voices, I think the rationale for that is quite clear. I don't think any of us would want to have anybody, feeling uncomfortable or not contributing because they may have something really worthwhile saying. But there's loads of obvious answers to the question, which is why aren't those people engaging? And we thought it worthwhile to state some of the obvious things just so that you can see maybe some of the topics we're going to look to try and avoid. Because I don't think that going over all these things which are often said is of a huge value in the short time that we've got today. So when faced with the question, why aren't people, why don't you think people engage in sessions? Why do you think they're silent? I think lack of confidence, lack of knowledge, introversion. I think introversion is something which is said often, and I think it's a bit of a catch-all. And I think that as soon as in some people's minds, people say, "Oh, they're an introvert," I think it means that we then step back and we just assume that then there's nothing we can do about it. So, while there are lots of obvious reasons why, we're not going to focus too deeply on these today. John, is there anything you'd like to say about some of these obvious reasons?
Yeah, I think by virtue of these being obvious, what often happens as well is that we can make those mental leaps, and our own cognitive biases can often kick in as a facilitator. As a facilitator in a session, you're there as a neutral holder of the meeting and the neutral holder of the process. You're there to help enable the conversations happening rather than lead it. So although these are obvious, it's really important to be aware of them and aware of your own cognitive biases. Because somebody might not have their camera on may not mean that they're actually not engaged. It might just be that their environment is not safe enough for them to share that. They're at home, the kids are in the background. It may be that their technology is not up to it. So don't go into these kind of things if somebody's not engaging with the bias that they're always kind of I suppose disinterested or not particularly participating because of for ill intent. So these are really useful things to think about and useful things to have almost sort of penned in the mind that these are potential options why, but they are obvious as well. In a room setting when you're kind of in front of somebody and it's just a small group of people around a table, there's less fear there because you're not on a camera, you're not kind of in front of everybody. It's almost like you're taking center stage on a remote call all the time. People can get quite fearful of that. So be conscious of these things and about how we pull those conversations out, because if we have got people who are really fearful, they don't want to put themselves forward, and we pull them out and ask them to talk about everything inside of the class, then there could be an opportunity to go for a more engaging and involved kind of approach. So the obvious stuff, definitely really important. Try not to let your cognitive biases get in the way. Be conscious of these things. But we wanted to focus and deep dive into the not so obvious stuff, maybe the stuff that's behind it a bit. Ben?
Yeah, and I think there's one thing that just dawned on me when you were talking there, John, and one of the things that should be on this kind of not so obvious list, which I will add right now, because that's the joys of technology, right? Is that we can do this type of thing. So the one out there is it's last, but by no means least, is you.
Me?
It's you, John.
Me specifically.
It's all about you. It's all about you. No, I think us, maybe the facilitator. I think some of the reason why people aren't contributing isn't because of things that are totally out of control and it's everybody else. Some of the reasons why people aren't contributing is because of you. Because of the way that you are engaging them, because of the way you're using your voice, because of the way that you're not engaging them in some way, where you are looking, where you aren't looking. So don't ever think that the reason why people are not engaging or being quiet is because of something that's totally out of your control, right? Sometimes it is you. Like, we are often part of the problem for in that workshop or that meeting. We are part of the system as a facilitator.
It's a really interesting reflection, actually. I think we need to be able to be self-reflective on how our presence turns up for the people in the room. And if we're overbearing, we're talking at people, we're highlighting individuals, we're using techniques which are going to make people feel even more self-conscious and even more kind of threatened in that way, then they are going to sort of back out. They are going to sort of not put themselves forward. So creating an environment can be such a useful way to do that. And being reflective on your facilitation technique can be difficult to start off with, especially as you start these things out with new teams and new organizations, new meetings, but you're not going to have all of the answers. Being able to self-reflect on whether you're the one that's bringing these problems into the room and how you can then enable the problems to go away is kind of an important part of that thing. Really great. Yeah, thanks, man. That's great reflection.
Yeah. Well, it seems because we've got something on here saying, when the point number 3 there, not knowing it's their turn. Sometimes people are silent because they don't know it's their turn, or because they don't feel like they can have a turn. And part of the role of a facilitator is to give everybody a voice and to ensure that everyone can use their voice. And we'll talk about techniques and a few tips for working around that particular issue as we progress shortly. John, is there any other not so obvious reason why people won't use their voice in a workshop or meeting setting that you'd like to pick up on?
Yeah, only because I had a meeting earlier today and I had some technical issues with that particular meeting that I had with the client I'm working with, and they have a particular version of Microsoft Teams. Other tools are available, obviously, and this particular issue is just something that is persistent. Always a reconnecting issue. It goes through a RAS VPN type system, and it kind of creates a problem. You have to restart the system, you have to restart the tool, and if you've got back-to-back meetings and you're going from one system to another system to have that meeting, and that system crashes out, you're going to be late to the meeting. It's hard for you to start it up. So technical issues could be a real reason why people aren't engaging. Either they're talking and their mics are muted by accident, they pressed the wrong button, or the cameras are off because there's been a technical issue with the actual system itself. So always go with positive intent, or at least curious intent. If you can't be positive intent all the time, at least curious as to why. So don't necessarily take on board that people are not engaging with you because they don't want to, because they're bored, because they're off the side typing away, doing another thing. There could be some other reasons why that is. And if we keep that curious intent in mind, technical issues are a bane. Going through different clients and working with different environments can be really difficult. And so some of those things can be quite hard. So making sure that we're aware of the technical constraints and always invite people to have their cameras on, invite people to talk, inviting people to engage is super important. If we dictate, then we're kind of trying to control the space rather than being cognizant of the environment that they're in and what's going to give them the best service as well. So as a facilitator, how do we serve the people that we're working with is a really important part of that.
And I think that's part of the challenge, isn't it? As a facilitators, we're there to serve. We're absolutely there to serve and do what we can do to make sure everyone can contribute and we get the most from everyone. Now, whilst I just dilly-dally around here with some of the technology, I think the one thing which is very close to my heart, which I think like is worth mentioning now, is that sometimes people are quiet because of personal issues that are happening, and it isn't to do with the facilitation, it isn't to do with the setup of the meeting, it isn't to do with anything else other than they're overwhelmed, they're stressed, something's happened at home, something's happened with their kids, with their partner, their significant other, and these things bleed into some of our sessions. So it's always worthwhile considering this, and we'll talk about maybe ways in which you can perhaps not, or in the moment and after the moment, how you can deal with people who are having some kind of personal issue in the meeting, which is maybe making them not contribute in the same way that they can do. Now, I think what we're going to be doing next is I want to pick up on one particular not so obvious thing, and then going to share a few concepts from this book. For those who haven't seen it before, Reading the Room, Group Dynamics for Coaches and Leaders. I'll give a bit of an overview of that, and then we'll start talking about some of the tips and tricks and techniques that we can utilize to get everyone engaged. So if we just bring this up again, let's look at some of these not so obvious things. It's this second one here, Group Dynamics. I think what you can find is that sometimes when we think of group dynamics, we think of the strong people in the room. We think of dominant personalities overshadowing kind of quieter members and making it hard to give them opportunities to speak. And whilst group dynamics feels like a scary thing, and in that book, Reading the Room, there's a huge amount of information on group dynamics. Actually, some of the time, just by introducing a few concepts to people and getting to know people a bit before the session, and maybe even in the session, using what I'm about to show you, can really help. So in the book Reading the Room, which is available on Amazon, it's not a cheap book. It's worth, I would say it's worth the investment. There's so much gold in there, a huge amount of information. And what it talks about is operating systems, communicating operating systems, that we all have a preference for the operating system that we tend to default to. It's our preference. Doesn't mean we can't change, doesn't mean we can't flip it based upon context, but we all have a preference. Some people have a preference for a closed operating system, and this is like a monarchy. This is where all the focus is towards the leader and the organization. There are clearly defined roles. There are strong formal leaders. We're able to plan. We're able to execute. It's about security, stability. It's about stasis. It's about keeping things the same. So if you're going to be having a workshop and you're looking to have people collaborate and generate ideas and be peers with each other and use their voice, what you might find is if the people in the room have a preference for a closed operating system and you've designed something which is really, and I cringe when I say the word, but really zany, wacky workshop, that actually if they're more inclined to a closed operating system, they're probably not going to want to be involved and they're not going to use their voice that much. So one of the operating systems, one of the three, is a closed operating system. Another one is an open operating system. This is more like teamwork. And this is where the orientation of the people who have a preference towards this operating system is towards a collective. So we're all about consensus and commitment, about adapting, participating, about making a plan, having a process, and executing that. So if I look at some work I was doing yesterday with a developer, I was working with him. We adapted our plan. We looked at the implementation. We looked at what had to be done. Me and him, between us, we sought consensus. We got commitment to the solution that we wanted to implement. And then we knew our roles. We went off and then we're working together. We're chatting over Slack, but we're doing it as a collective. Now, the problem with this is that at times, if people don't like working as part of a team, if they don't like following a process, then you put people in a workshop and it's all focused on this collective aspect, then they're not going to be wanting to speak up. Same as if they wanted a closed operating system and they just want to take charge. So some people prefer this collective open operating system. And the last one is the random. And I think this is often where workshops end up, which is it's all about exploration, creativity, innovation. There's not enough formal, not enough. I'm exposing my own preference there towards the operating system, which I prefer. There's not a huge amount of formal structure or process or leadership. It's all about the individual. And ultimately, one of the dysfunctions we see here is it can seem anarchy. Can seem like anarchy. So when we're designing a workshop, we have to consider that maybe not everybody wants to be in this kind of almost at times feeling like it's very random, very anarchistic. Can't say the word. Like there's some level of anarchy. There's no clear process. There's no clear leaders. We're not quite sure where we're going, and we're just exploring things. Right? If we design workshops with our preference in mind, say it's random, we're going to alienate people who are closed and who are open. If we develop workshops very much based on the open operating system, we're going to alienate those who are random and closed, and the same with the closed. So what I urge you to consider is, we'll be sharing this deck afterwards so you can get some of this information, is get to know the people who are going to come along to your session, understand perhaps a little bit more about which operating system they are operating within, and then you can design your sessions so that you can get equal voice by playing with the operating systems, by supporting those who maybe don't feel so comfortable in the random when you're in the random, or the open when you're in the open, to enable people to really get their voices out there. Now, I take no credit for this. I got all this inspiration from this amazing person here, Marsha Acker. She helped write the learning outcomes for IC Agile team facilitation course. She's written a book called The Art and Science of Facilitation, and she also has a new book out as well, which is Build Your Model for Leading Change. If you wanted to kind of hear some of this in her words, please do check out this podcast. Full disclosure, is my podcast, but do click on, I'll send you the link and you can click on that. And if you want to have a go at winning a copy of Marsha's latest book, there's a link in the deck that you can click on, and you can get the opportunity to win a copy of Marsha's latest book as well. So
just an interesting thing to reflect on, Ben. I think you've mentioned it there, but it was almost kind of in passing a little bit. And so I wanted to just highlight it a little bit, which is a really important part of the facilitation aspect, which is when you're designing your sessions. So I think the important thing here is that we should always try to design our sessions, actually kind of create an understanding of what the session's outcomes are, what the session's kind of requirements are, what the purpose of the meeting is for, or the event or the workshop, whatever. Quite often, I think, we can fall into the trap of, hey, let's just do something really cool and interactive. Let's break out the Lego. Let's do some interesting things. And we may lose the room before we've even started because we've not really kind of read the room very well. Just to sort of I'll pull it back to the book title.
Yeah,
really well. So
skills.
And so this is something I found quite useful, is getting to know the people beforehand. Now, in a room of, say, 15, 20 people, it's going to be quite hard to do a one-to-one with each one of these people. But pre-meetings, pre-calls with the people, understanding the environment. If you're just being drafted in as a facilitator to work with a company you don't work with, teams that you don't work with, but you're there as a neutral process holder, it's always good to understand the environment they're in. It's also good to push the boundaries a little bit. So I'm working with a big wealth management firm at the moment, and it's very corporate-y, central London, lots of suits. And you break out the Lego and they're kind of like overwhelmed by it to a degree, but then like they get involved because it's different to the boring status meetings they normally have. Where if I go into more of a creative environment, maybe they need a bit more structure, because a lean coffee and a kind of structure will just take them down rabbit holes where they can't really sort of get any real clear outcomes from it. So be really open to understanding where you're going to be doing this is super important. And if you don't have that, I think it's an important thing. So just to reflect on that, Ben, because one of the things that I often do is forget that we have to design these facilitations. In my earlier days, I would just turn up and say, I've got a structure for this, let's just do it. And I'm not really considering the audience. I'm not really considering it. So to anchor back into one of the things you said right at the beginning, we're there to serve the people in the room as a facilitator, as a neutral process holder, to help with that. I think it's super important to know that we're there to help them through and help them get to the outcomes they need. And if we come in with a precognition of where they're coming from and a precognition of what we think they should have, then we're not really serving them. We're really serving us. So be considerate about how you design for these environments. Super important.
Yeah. And so maybe that's, for me, then that practically one of the biggest first things I can take away about how do I get the quiet voices involved is invest the time at the beginning to get to know people a little bit, do your research. And I think this is one of the interesting things that people can learn from product managers and from user research and from UX, is that people who are really excellent in those roles wouldn't look to get something to market unless they've done the research. And each workshop or meeting that we run, you could say, is a product that we want to have value, and we want people to have some to return and to keep on purchasing that and to stay engaged and then to make decisions and get better and really push the organization forward. So getting to know our users, getting to know our stakeholders, doing that work up front means that we build our confidence, we build their confidence, and we can design something that fits the type of operating system dynamically that works with the people that are going to be turning up. And the Lego one's a classic. I'm not sure if our friend Chris Charlambus is on the here at all, but yeah, he does a lot of work with Lego Serious Play, and it's surprising the environments where it does land, surprising the environments where it doesn't. So great tip there, John. Preparation is key.
Absolutely. I think it's important then, if we sort of reflect on this from a top tips perspective, on the deck that we've been creating, we've also got some top tips that we've created. They're not as pretty as the other pages we've created, but we've got the top tips. And I think the first top tip is about creating that safe space. So Ben, if you could just share that on screen, I think that'd be useful.
Yeah, of course. I have put the link to the deck as well in the chat.
Okay.
If people want to take a look, I can see a few people there already, which is marvelous.
So yeah, creating a safe space. So what we talk about when we're creating safe spaces, when facilitating a session, often it comes into a confusion of, as a facilitator, how can I actually create safety? How can I create psychological safety with the people? Well, you can't create psychological safety. You can create an environment for safety to exist, but you can't automatically, by doing an exercise, make everyone feel psychologically safe. The way we can do those type of things, or to create the environment for safety, is to help with things like working agreements at the beginning of a workshop. How are we going to work together as part of this particular session? What are the things that we want to do and the things that we don't want to do? What happens if things go down the rabbit hole? How do we manage that? And by involving people in creating those at the beginning of a session, it can be very useful then to enable them to keep themselves accountable to their own agreements. Things like no interruption policies and rules. So if somebody's speaking, let them finish. Equal voice policy here, that's a great one, where everyone gets a chance to speak if they feel inclined to and if they want to. There's no just one person speaking here. We do things like personal stories. We try to keep away from the real cringe kind of worthy icebreakers, like tell us something interesting about yourself. We want to sort of get involved in like helping people to open up and to share shared experiences. So some of those things can be very useful right at the very beginning. It helps people start engaging. It helps people start opening up, and also helps you as a facilitator to gauge the level of interaction in the room. Who's leaning out, who's leaning in, who is really loud and who seems to be really quiet. And it helps you to gauge the pace and the energy of the session as well. So creating a very safe space to begin with, or an environment for safety to exist, is important. You can ask people about their preferred communication styles. We do this on our, let's have a look now. I think it's our Agile coaching course, actually. We talk about communication styles as part of the training from the back of the room module. And we also do it as part of our TBR training as well. We talk about preferred listening styles, preferred engagement styles, preferred communication styles. It's not that there are only people who can only learn by kinesthetic learning, or people who can only engage through reading books, who can only engage through audio video, but people have preferred styles. Understanding that at the beginning will also help you understand whether or not people want quiet time to read through a case study, or whether they want you to talk it through or watch a video. Those type of things can be useful as part of the setup for the session, but also allows you to dance in the moment as well. And then finally here, we've got engaging story. One of the big things that we want to do is, as a facilitator, albeit that we are holding the process neutrally, we also want to bring to life our shared experiences. And that can also help people come to life because they can connect with the context. We're not immediately just going straight to them cold and saying, we need an example from you. And they're like thinking on the spot, frightened. And if we're going around the room, they're going to be frightened, waiting for the next persons to come up. And if we're sort of doing that, coming back into the session, and we're sat there waiting for our turn, we're not listening to them. In fact, we're actually listening to we're waiting to take a turn and listen for our view. And then afterwards, we're taking a big, deep breath. Oh, thank God for that. I'm finished now. And on to the next person. That's not really engaging. We're kind of frightening people. So I think it's great if we show a level of vulnerability and show a level of openness to the different ways of everyone talking and our shared experience and our shared story. That can help people come to life a bit with this. And, oh, well, if he's had such a problem with this imposter syndrome, maybe I have as well. Maybe I can engage with it. So just an opportunity there to open up, create that environment for safety. Ben, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, of course. Now, there's a ton of top tips on here. I'm not sure if we're going to have time to get through them all, but on that deck, which is in the link there, you can get all these top tips. And feel free to share this deck around. It isn't finished yet, so if you're going to download it, don't download it yet, because we're going to keep adding to it over the next half an hour. But my thoughts on this is interesting, John, because I think that, and this is a bit of a journey, and I don't know if Jose is still on the call or not, but when I did the virtual TBR course, one of the things I thought was brilliant, but it also equally underwhelmed me about it massively, was the starting level from a technical tooling perspective, and how it was very much kind of teaching people how to do very, very basic things technically, I felt. And we're lucky we get to train people who are very, very au fait with digital tools. Some people are digital native, and they get it all. And so I think that when we're considering about creating that safe space, I think there is a tool which I picked up in that VTBR, but also was mentioned when I interviewed a guy called Evan Unger a couple of weeks ago for the podcast, who's a facilitation guru. And this idea of chat storms or just writing stuff down. That actually, if you want to create a safe space and you want to get everyone speaking from the get-go, then chat storms are when, I mentioned this when our training from the back of the Zoom webinar last year, is when everybody is typing an answer to a question into the chat in Zoom. And then on a count of 5, everyone pushes return, enter at the same time. And you get to see all the different responses there. And then you ask each person just to read up what they typed. It's a really quick and easy way to get everybody comfortable, everyone contributing, getting to see actually if they aren't contributing because they're nervous, they don't know as much as other people, they're bound to see that some other people are at a similar level to them. And it's a great way to make them feel more comfortable, connect them to the topic, connect them to each other, and then begin to use their voice. If people are really nervous about using the tooling, then why not get people to write something down on a Post-it note with a Sharpie and just hold it up to the camera? And just hold it at the camera for us so that people can see what they've written down. If you haven't got access to chat, using a Google Doc or some other online collaborative tool gives everyone an opportunity just to write something down and then get people to use their voice. I think what we found, and I believe there might be some research around this as well, but I cannot quote it, is that if you get people speaking at the beginning of a workshop or meeting, the likelihood is they will use their voice later on as well. So, John, you mentioned our coaching and facilitation courses. One of the things that we do, which we've really thought long and hard about, because I said the engagement we get on our courses is phenomenal. We've had some amazing people, and people's confidence grows and grows and grows. And by the end of it, you can't shut people up, which is awesome, right? It's just what we want. But we spend a lot of time at the beginning getting everyone to use their voice and getting everyone to answer some questions. And the questions are related to the topic, and sometimes the questions are questions which help them reflect. Yeah. And I think that's some of the key that we found to really get everybody, all voices and all insights being shared.
Yeah, we use training from the back of the room to create most of these workshops and training sessions that we build. And one of the important parts of that, if you haven't seen it before, is that the very first part of building some workshops or training from it is the connections activities. If you were to look at our agenda for some of our training courses, you would see our connections activity on day 1 take in quite a lot of time. A big chunk of the first day is on connecting everyone with each other. And there's lots of continuous connection activities and concepts brought to life and concrete practices and conclusions throughout the whole of the courses and the workshops and the sessions we run. But that connections activity, if you were to look at it from a an agenda perspective, a time alone perspective, and just look at the numbers of time that we spend there, people rush through the connections. Quick, let's get a very quick activity, get everyone talking, and straight into talking to them about the actual content. What we found is that with lots of engagement really early on, it beds in this almost camaraderie, this kind of group, this shared team who are all learning together, who are all working together, collaborating together. And it really accelerates the engagement later on. Some of those techniques we use right at the beginning, and as Ben mentioned there about the tooling, for example, we might use a remote session, we might use something like Miro or Mural to help have a whiteboard collaboration experience for people, and we'll have everyone contributing in one place. If we're using Miro, we can't assume as facilitators that people know how the tool works. They may never have seen it before, maybe not have heard of it, and they may feel, well, maybe it's a bit late for me to ask that. I don't know that. I can't really ask for help on this. So we actually spend a bit of time at the beginning of day one as well, getting everybody onboarded in the tool. It might only take 5-10 minutes. And then within the first conversations, we're actually capturing them getting into the board and putting post-its out and getting their names on there to make sure we can get rid of those technical barriers, but also to get them talking. And we engage them really early on in those conversations, and we try to relax the anxieties down so people are talking. One of the big things we do is small breakout rooms to enable those conversations to start early and often. And we use a lot of liberating structures to create some interesting conversations as part of it.
It's interesting you mentioned the small breakout rooms. I think to get people talking, and this is something that always astounds me. I can be in a, I've had the pleasure of taking some people on a bit of a, I hate the phrase, I'm going to kick myself for saying it, but like an educational journey around large-scale Scrum over the last few months. Awesome groups of people, but larger groups than I would tend to do remotely. And when you're in that, when you're trying to set up an activity and you're asking people, do you understand it? And maybe you're checking their understanding and no one's contributing. You think, wow, everyone's being really quiet. Maybe no one's going to contribute. When you sneak into the breakout rooms and have a listen, you're always astounded at how much people are talking and how everyone's engaged. And I'm always wrong. I'm always wrong. The people that I think are not actually going to contribute at all are the ones that are contributing the most in the breakout rooms. They just don't feel comfortable in that larger group. Now, with that kind of not feeling comfortable in the larger group and people not feeling like they can show their vulnerability and hold their hand up and say, like, I'm not good in these situations, I've got, or whatever it may be, that vulnerability is hard for people to show. And a little while ago, there was always a lag on live streams, but a statement from Russell and a question from Stuart Young, which were related, which is Russell was saying about, John, your point on vulnerability. And, it helps to create a safe space. And maybe sometimes if a lack of our own vulnerability may lead to things not working out as we would expect, and a big learning point for us. And Stu then comes and says, well, what's your advice on turning up as your authentic self when it comes to facilitation? Highlighting your strengths, weaknesses, or characteristics and attributes. And that's a very big question to ask. But I feel that we should spend just a moment, John, kind of sharing some of our thoughts on this in relation to helping the quieter people find their voice and share their valuable insights. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the question, Stu. I think it's an important thing. We've got to be able to be authentic and facilitate and show up as ourselves to give the full experience and to serve the people we're working with. I think as part of those introductory, sorry, Stu, as part of the introductory kind of sessions, as part of those workshop connections activities, don't forget that you're also part of that room. Now, although you're a neutral process holder and you are there to help facilitate the discussion and to help make sure we achieve the outcomes that the group needs, it's also fine for us to be part of those introductory sessions, part of those discussion points. So if it's a one-to-one kind of a pair share of introducing yourself to each other and talking about those things, I think it's important. If you're in a small breakout room with other people, it's important as well. I think it's really key to make sure that we're talking from a point of self authenticity. We've all been in a room where we don't feel confident. We've all been in a room where we might have felt a bit of an imposter. We've all been in a room where we feel anxious that what we're going to say is going to be a real problem. And it's okay to bring that out. Like, we're not born and molded into this experience. I mean, I had hair when we started doing this agile thing, and that was quite a long time ago now. But what we're now doing is we're learning from our benefits of that. It's okay to be in the mindset of somebody who's at the beginning of their journey and to reflect back your experience as well. So it's important that we don't just show up to be, kind of higher up in the hierarchy of the room. We're there as a neutral process holder. We've had our own lived experience, and so have the people in the room. If we're conscious of that and authentic to that, and it can make a big difference to the people who are participating. It's going to open them up to sharing as well. Ben?
Yeah, lost the button there, John. That's what it was.
Okay.
No, it's a great. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, and I think it's really a tough call to know how much of yourself to show. I mean, this is where, for me, I think the journey as a facilitator, as a coach, or even just as a human being, really hinges upon our ability to reflect upon our own behaviors, our own performance, our own biases, and then find ways to improve. I think that there can be value, as manipulative as it may sound, in showing vulnerability as a calculated approach to make people feel more comfortable in the room. I think that is something which is it's a manipulation, but I don't think it's a bad one if that is who you are. And for you, it's just a scale of how much vulnerability you're choosing to show at that point. I'm a huge fan of being myself, but only because I spent a lot of time trying to figure out who I am. And I think that it's one that we need to tread carefully around, because I don't think a lot of us we don't often give ourselves the time to figure out who truly is that authentic self, so we know who we're showing. So I would say it's one to approach with caution, especially when you are paid to come in and facilitate. You have to be reasonably comfortable and confident and have the trust of the room to share your weaknesses, as an example. Now, John, let me just try and kind of get us side by side here. There we go. One of the ways around this, though, when it comes to strengths or weaknesses, I think, and one of the great ways to get those quiet voices involved, is co-facilitation. And not often spoken about technique, but one which I think that if you're going to take anything away from this, those of you that are watching this live or watching this on the replay, co-facilitation is an amazing way to make sure that you can get every voice heard and those insights known and recorded and do something with them. John, what are your thoughts on co-facilitation?
I do a lot of co-facilitation with Ben, and we've done a lot of co-trainings as well. It allows you to tag team a little bit. Now, it doesn't mean that you have different personas that you play, but potentially you've got different ways to then support the room, whether it's a technical side of things, whether it's making sure that we're on time, making sure that we're kind of helping each other from a logistics perspective. But also if you're turn up as your true self, some people may engage with more of one facilitator than the other. You might be able to draw on different lived experiences to help showcase that kind of that approach in the room. And I always find that if you've got some of that opportunity to mix things up a bit, so you've got a little bit of banter, a little bit of opportunity to share, and also have different voices in the room, it can also mix things up a little bit for the group that you're facilitating. So you've got the benefit of two people helping to support each other and support and serve the room. And you might be able to get some different angles on there. If Ben is presenting a particular piece about, say, the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel, for example, and I'm kind of taking a look at who's participating, who's not participating, it's an opportunity for me to sort of say, okay, so let's take a note of that. That person's not really engaging very well. I wonder why that might be. Let's have a see if there's an opportunity to connect with that person to see if everything's okay. So you've got that opportunity to kind of balance the two, because if you've got quite a large group, it can be quite hard to facilitate those conversations in a big, wide room environment. So if you're going to create smaller groups to do that, it allows that co-facilitator to support from another side.
Awesome. Let me just fix the screen again now, because, of course, every time I do this, there we go. I need to try and fix it. So we are getting towards the end. We're in the last phrase, last 15 minutes. I thought perhaps we could do a quick back and forth, John, on some of the remaining top tips. Not too much time. And then I'm not sure if I'm feeling brave enough with the technology today to see if we can maybe invite someone to come and join us to ask a live question.
Try it.
If you are interested in coming and joining us for a few moments towards the end to ask a question live and be used as part of this live stream here and forever, you want your moment of fame, then please do put in the chat that you're interested in joining us, and then I will take a look at who responds, and then if it's going to work out, I'll send you a direct message over LinkedIn with a link you can use to come and join us. But before we do that, me and John will do a quick very short, rapid tapas style, small dishes, easy to digest. On the top, some of the other top tips we've got for helping to engage some of those quieter voices. So I'll share my screen, John.
Okay, thanks.
Do you want to go first?
Absolutely.
So where are we? We've done that one. There we go.
Okie dokie. So icebreakers with warm-up activities. One of the big things here is to try to avoid things which are too personal, potentially. Try to avoid things which are going to make people feel very self-conscious or judged in that way. So you can ask things in a very light-hearted manner. Some things you can do truths and a lie. You can do things which are, what's your favorite hobby? One thing I've been doing more recently on online events is asking people what's the last thing that made you smile. So it's not really trying to get them to talk about specific project statuses or what they've been doing or their life journey. You get a lot of insight from things like that. What's the last thing that made you smile? My dog this morning jumped up on me, almost knocked me over when I was on a call. It made me smile because he's a black Labrador, he's 2 years old, and he's 35 kilos of muscle that he keeps forgetting that he's not a puppy. So it makes me laugh because he's very bound. Well, he's in another room right now just to not interrupt us today. So asking those type of things are useful. I did used to ask, how are people feeling today? Now that is a very open question. And by asking those type of open questions, you also invite people in to sort of say, I feel tired, I feel down, I feel stressed, I feel overwhelmed. And it all depends on what you want to get out of the session. If it's a short session and you want to sort of kind of build the energy up, asking people about the last thing that made them smile could be a useful way to bring that to life. If you're opening people up to asking things like, tell us how you felt, then you are also opening up the room for understanding them further, which is good, but also inviting that kind of, well, I'm a bit tired, a bit stressed, a bit this, and it might take the energy away. So we might want to sort of look at how you approach it. Some neutral stuff that everyone can engage with, which doesn't allow people to judge. You also find some really interesting things out with these icebreakers. So, for example, you might have gone, tell us one thing about yourself that we don't know. And it's like, well, I'm 40% covered in tattoos. Most people don't know this. So it's like, oh, really? I didn't know you had tattoos. What the hell is it? And so there's a conversation about the human aspect as well. I agree, Jose, as well. Yeah, absolutely. The last thing I smiled about could be dangerous as well. And this is the thing about dancing in the moment as a facilitator. There's lots of different things in the tool belt. Absolutely. What we want to do here is understand a little bit more about how we engage with the room early and often, warm-up activities to get them speaking early and conversation with each other. And if we feel like it's quite a dangerous room insofar as everyone's really kind of guarded and not really engaging, what we might want to turn around and say is, let's put them into smaller rooms to interact with each other or have table-based activities where they're going to talk to each other rather than talking to the entire room.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, there's always the right to pass.
That's an interesting one. We haven't had that in here. I'll add that.
No, we haven't. Yeah, no, I think that's a good one. We should add it to the deck. The right to pass, which we'll talk about in a moment. And Jose, you're right. It can send people into a very, very bad spin, as can many things we say and do. And I think this is all about the risk we're willing to take, the risk versus reward. I think that if you know the room and you've got a good feel for the room, I think that if you've got the skills, you'd be surprised what you can get away with. I think that showing that vulnerability can help as well. I mean, we have had situations where we've been, and it's difficult with our training. I'd say that a lot of our training isn't really like training. A lot of our training is very much more like a workshop, but we've had people contact us and we've spent the evening or the morning talking to someone on the course about how they've been feeling, about their struggles, about what's going on in their lives, what's going on from in the course, so that when they come back into the course, they're ready to go, they're ready to learn. And so it's part of the service that we offer. I think that don't think that to get those voices engaged, all voices, don't ever think that facilitation is just that moment when you're in the block of time that you've allocated. It's before and it's after and it's in between. But there's a question that's come up on LinkedIn. I feel we might as well answer this rather than kind of reading through what's on the screen. Is how effective have you found real-time polls when face-to-face and remotely? And this is an interesting question. I'm guessing that the person that wrote that hasn't had a huge degree of success. I'm guessing here. John, how have you found it?
So it's an interesting one, mainly because, and it depends on the audience and how well you know them, and the type of format of the session as well. That can be quite important as well. So having people in a room all look at their phones and poll something on a remote poll to show something on a slide deck can be useful if it's a broad range and you're kind of talking to 100 people in a meetup. That can be quite useful, and it kind of give you a bit of a gauge on it. Similarly, on a broadcast like webinar, similar to this type of thing, where you want to get a good idea of what people are feeling in the room and you can demonstrate that up on screen without having to have 50 people trying to overtalk each other, it can be useful. So I think that can be helpful as long as you ask a great question which is open and allows for those polls coming in. I think one of the interesting things that we've found is that in an environment where you're in a room with 20 people, 15 people doing a training session or workshop, by involving them into doing polls on a digital media, although it can give you some interesting insight and interesting stuff on a screen to look at, it can also pull them out of the room and onto their phones, which is a distraction. So if we've got a smaller setting and we've got some great conversations happening, just because we've got a poll available to us, do we need to engage with that poll, or should we use more visible techniques in the room? Should we get post-it notes, dot voting, get it up on the wall, get their thoughts, get their hands up, get them talking? So there are useful ways to leverage both. It depends on the environment, I suppose.
Yeah, it really does, and we'll be quick. Now we are running out of time. There's a few questions to go through, but the tool that I recommend to people generally is because I like it, and I know the CEO. It is I use our slides. It's a really cool tool, and it's quite affordable, easy to use. And it's the only tool that I've used where I've had polls and questions where I've had the highest engagement ever. Now, it's interesting. I don't think it was the tool. I think it was because I was doing it to a much younger generation than myself. And I gave a half-hour, 40-minute talk. I think I had about 3,000 or 4,000 reactions. We had over like 80 people responding to all of the polls out of a room full of about 100. Which said to me there's a huge level of engagement there. I think if I had done that same thing with a different generation, I don't think it would have been the same level. So I think that real-time polls using our heart size or Mentimeter, even doing polls via Zoom and stuff, I think they can work, but you need to understand your audience and how well the tech holds up, and try and make the questions, I don't know, funny or engaging or give them reason to get involved. Doing things face-to-face like polling is really interesting because I don't know. I'm never a fan of it being too binary because not often things are. So I'm what I'm saying with a long-winded way is I'm really on the fence when it comes to the effectiveness of polls.
It's fine to be on the fence as well, Ben.
Yeah,
and I think it does depend on the audience, right? Audience and media and context can be key to whether these things are going to work well or not. I think our heart slides are great. What you were saying about the reactions there is that although you're presenting on screen, essentially a PowerPoint presentation, but using our heart slides, people can react. So you're talking about something and people can put a thumbs up emoji or an okay or a heart. And those reactions gives you an indication of the level of engagement from the people watching the slides. When they don't want to all type a chat, they're able to do it. So it's a useful measure. Am I on the right track? If no one's engaging, no one's putting emojis on it. God, am I boring people? Is everyone still working? Is the technology still on?
No, it's true. Yeah. I mean, I won't go into any details, but there was someone else who used a similar tool. But the question that if you're going to open up, if you're going to do something like if you're teaching or if there's some element of facilitating and you're looking to kind of use a tool or something like that to get people engaged, and you'll do it, like, be aware of the generation and make sure there's someone moderating the questions and comments. Because there was a rather embarrassing moment where someone was, I won't go into details, but I found it very funny. I don't think the person that was talking would have found it very funny if they'd understood what had been asked of them. But, moderation at times. To say so quickly, Jose, thank you very much for being so open and sharing what you did in the chat there. You're absolutely right, and I think that we need to be really aware of people's situations when we're facilitating, and if we're going to use those questions, only use questions that you feel you have the ability to deal with any potential fallout from that, so that you can pivot in the moment and know what you need to do. I've had situations where, yes, I have asked questions that have lit a fire in someone that have resulted in a rather tense conversation. I will just take a time out on the workshop and I will spend some time with that person one-on-one to make sure that they're okay. And never have I ever been in a situation where peace hasn't been made and the workshop hasn't then been continued to be a success. A great question here. I can't see who it is because our tool here isn't just saying LinkedIn user. It says, and I wonder if I can put this up actually. What was a recent learn or takeaway that either of you have had that changed your mindset and or approach to facilitating? You got a quick one, John?
Yeah, I have. So just a quick one, I suppose. The thing that sort of changed my approach to it was, I came in with a precognition about what I thought the session would go like. I had an agenda that I'd worked with the client beforehand. I'd already worked everything out as part of it, and we'd done quite tight boxes for a full day session. People flying in from all over Europe to get into this one session in this one thing to get clear outcomes. And the agenda got blown to hell because the thing that we thought would take an hour took 4 hours. But in the moment, that's what was needed to happen. And that's super important. We can very control ourselves and constrict ourselves with the agendas we design and we build together for these particular type of sessions. But in the moment, with the humans interacting with each other and what they need in the moment, it might be different. And so it was a great success, the meeting. We didn't get to half of the agenda items, but that'll be in another follow-up session. The important thing is that we discussed things like values and mission and vision for that client, which took a lot longer than they thought they needed. And actually, they came up with a much better alignment. So for me, not holding on too tight to the agenda and keeping a visibility on the outcomes that you're looking for, the purpose of the session, and any questions that need answering. So it was a success, but it wasn't what we planned. And it was still very engaging. So I think the big thing that sort of changed my mindset a lot of this was a long time ago, was learning to let go of that. Creating an agenda, creating a structure, creating that thing, but learning to dance in the moment. What the client needs may not be the same way as how it was planned. And that's okay, as long as the outcomes come the same.
Awesome. Thank you, John. I'll have a quick go at this. I'll keep it super brief. So some follow your nose, go where there's appetite for traction. Absolutely. Like one thing that we teach and we're very keen on making sure people are aware of is the emergent agenda versus a proposed agenda. But do make sure if you're going with emergent agenda, that the general will of the room is enough to go in that direction. Like John was saying, make sure you're going to be getting towards the outcome the room wants to get towards the outcome too, because sometimes something new and shiny comes up that perhaps isn't related to the outcome. But my big recent takeaway, and I got this from Evan Unger. I'll put a link. I think I'll dig out a link and I'll put it in the chat so that you can go to his LinkedIn profile. Is that I think we spend too much time in our roles as product coaches, agile coaches, scrum masters, leaders, managers, as general humans in organizations, focusing on how do we get better at facilitation ourselves, when the focus should be how do we get better at facilitation ourselves so that we can get better at teaching others how to facilitate. Because it's only when we can teach others how to facilitate and we can imbue some of these facilitation skills in other leaders, managers, coaches, in the teams that we're working with, can we then step back and let facilitation really deliver upon the value that's promised. If it's always us having to do it, then it's never going to get the same level of scalability and widespread value than if we teach it to others and help other people become awesome facilitators too.
I love that. Yeah, make ourselves redundant almost, right? If they can do it themselves, then we've done a good thing. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, John, we're in the last second, so this leads us to say thank you very much. And Jose, mate, thank you very much for your courage in sharing what you shared. It meant a lot to me, and it was very warmly received. So thank you for your courage there. The deck is at a state now where I think it's pretty much complete. I think John's added his profile, which is fantastic. If you want to download it, please do download it, share it, let everyone know on LinkedIn what you loved about this, what you didn't. We want to make these live streams a regular thing. It's easier when we know we've got people chomping at the bit to come along. So please do tell people and share the information, share the documentation. We'll be back again potentially next month. I haven't decided actually what that's going to be, but John, I'm not sure if you're up for another facilitation tapas.
Another facilitation would be great. I've got some really good stuff that we can bring to light. Some interesting things from Stuart there. Most people focus on the technology and we forget about the human side. There's some technology stuff that we can talk about, how you can host these things really well, use some great tools, technology, but also the human connection. So I think there's something we can pull together from there, a bit from our Zoom from the back of the room, and also some of the other stuff around our facilitation course. So I think there's some stuff we can pull from that.
Yeah, excellent. Well, everyone, we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much for coming along. My name is down there. It's Ben Maynard, and that's John Spruce. And we will see you all again next month. Thank you for your time.